Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Time for another show. Hey, it's been a month since my birthday. Isn't that fantastic? And everybody else's birthday on the show as well, which for some reason, it's crazy. We've all had our stars aligned. Happy 1 month anniversary of your birthday to Armando. Tomorrow for Scott. There are actually people involved with this show whose birthday does not fall in late August, but, the cool ones, I guess, really do. Anyway, lots to catch up on today, as usual. It's, as you know, it's election season. It is the end of the fiscal year. Lots of fun things going on to keep us occupied. Another story. It's not a new Republican pervert. It's one of the old Republican perverts with a new story about how perverted he is, if we want to get back into that topic. Everyone's favorite, Johnny McEntee, the sex pest, counterfeiter, and compulsive gambler who was once fired from the White House for a failure to pass a security clearance test, brought back into the White House by Donald Trump, and now, as an acknowledged sex pest, would be put in charge of staffing the entire executive branch in any second Trump administration. Would be in charge of placing, it's exactly where you want somebody who is a known sex pest and somebody who has a compulsive gambling problem in HR. So, yeah, well, that'll be a state-sanctioned sex trafficking ring run by Johnny McEntee out of any second Trump White House. Perfect for, leading the free world or things like that. All right, well, we can go into the details of that one perhaps later on in the show. Just wanted to sort of throw that one out there today. More news about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. suing some states to get himself on the ballot and others to get himself off the ballot. So, one coherent move after another from the RFK Jr. campaign. Not surprising, I guess. And, I don't know. Lots of things to round up from all over the place. Today's online social media hotness. I don't know if there's one thing in particular, except that I do see we are being properly reminded all the time by the several players in our wing, I guess, of the online-osphere about how much money is still necessary at the down ballot levels and for local organizers to get people out door knocking and handing out literature and making sure people are registered, and while there's still time for that, and making sure people can get to the polls or have requested their ballots by mail or whatever, as the case may be, and that there's a tremendous shortfall in the funding necessary for that. Some of that will, in the end, rain down from up top, the millions and millions of dollars, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that have been pouring in for the Harris-Walz campaign. But it takes a while, and, everybody needs to take a bite of that on the way down, and it doesn't always trickle all the way down. The best thing you can do with your donation is target it down ballot, and I guess to that end, I'll have my reminder up here to get back to Jeremy Freiberger's discussion of the topic and wherever else his mind may have taken him in reflecting on our show over the past couple of weeks. Greg Dworkin is collecting his usual raft of stories. We're up into the mid-30s already in terms of entries. Some of those are just little pictures that he uses to illustrate the points as we go on. But we'll differentiate between them now. He's here. He's ready to go. As far as I know, the bear isn't chasing him around the house, and nor vice versa. So we're in good shape. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. So apparently, I don't know if it's the same bear or a different bear, but there have been some bears breaking into houses in my neighborhood. Well, it wasn't me, but somebody had one of these
those are the police
walled
bears.
in. I can't say screened in because it's like windows and walls porch, and they had left some fruit in a bowl, and the bear decided it would be a good snack. So they broke into the
they're right.
Porch there and ate all the fruit. And the dogs in the house took one look at the bear and ran the other way, which is very smart.
Okay, good dog.
So nobody got hurt and all that, but my feeders aren't going back out at least until mid-November when they become they don't hibernate, but they become dormant.
Sleepier. Okay.
They get a little sleepy.
Just give us the fruit and no one gets hurt.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I was listening to your John McEntee thing, and I forgot to include that in the roundup. I mean, there's so many other things we're going to talk about, like Anthony D'Esposito in New York 4.
Yes.
But Johnny McEntee was a starting quarterback for the Yukon Huskies.
That's true. I did read that. You would know that.
Yeah, so like all the local reporters, John McEntee, former Yukon Husky quarterback, was dinged for hitting on teen girls, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the story about him. So
yes, that's the latest version of it. He started a dating app of some kind, but it was mostly an excuse for him to direct message teenage girls and sext them. So that's it. Yeah. Gross.
So let's we're going to do Congress first before we get to the state of the race.
All right.
What I have here is Anthony D'Esposito scandal sparks migraine for Republicans.
What?
Or as Political Playbook puts it, when news broke Monday in the New York Times about a scandal involving a Long Island Republican congressman, we couldn't help thinking about another Long Island Republican congressman. So we called George Santos to ask him what he thinks about Anthony D'Esposito. What Anthony D'Esposito did, Esposito put his lover on the payroll.
That is commonly
put his longtime fiancée's daughter and his former mistress on his congressional payroll.
Yeah.
And so George Santos was asked to comment on it, and he basically said, what
a good idea.
Schadenfreude.
Oh.
This is the guy who was pointing his finger at me, telling me I have ethical issues.
Yes.
Well, guess what? Everybody in Congress has ethical issues.
Okay,
that's why
Spider-Man.
It was so ridiculous. Yes, I take responsibility for what I did. Yes,
no,
I
he
did
doesn't.
Wrong. But what I'm saying is they're all like me.
Well, that's true. It's the Spider-Man meme, right? All right. It's very old-timey scandal, I must say. So he's a conservative guy, like going to do the 1950s, 60s
Yeah,
things.
I mean, this
is usually a stripper
like,
you put on the payroll. But
2024 worthy, but he did it, and it's a tight race, and if he loses, that'd be great. So I'm just saying, John McEntee, Anthony D'Esposito, Trump in general.
It's it's a good one. It's a good scandal. It's solid. Not only is he,
this is the face of the Republican Party in 2024. Yeah. They attract these people.
They do. And my only theory that has survived all of it is that they've come to the conclusion that, one, that no one's paying attention to politics, but that somehow being in politics and wielding power is like the only hiding spot left for them, but they also secretly want to get caught too.
Well, there's another hiding spot.
Weird.
I mean, I have to remind people, Anthony D'Esposito is a former police detective.
Oh yes, right. That's another famous. Yeah. That's true too. Plenty of stories about that particular illness as well.
I have access to things, and I can make you do stuff.
Yeah. Right. Or you're in trouble, and if you want to get out of trouble, I can make you do stuff, and then I'll look the other way as your paperwork disappears.
Right. As a New York-based Democratic strategist, John Reinisch says, this is a moderate suburban district, but transgressions like this are not smiled on. So, this action just in and of itself could alter the
taking money on top of it, too. Like taxpayer subsidizing your affairs. Nah, come on.
Yeah, they don't like that.
No.
Our taxes are too high anyway. And so look what the taxes go for. They pay his mistress. That's ridiculous.
Right. Pay your own mistress. Leave us alone.
Right. For those of you, and I'm looking at you, Brett Stevens.
No.
Who claim that they're not voting for Trump, but they can't vote for Harris because who knows what her policies are. She's giving a major economic speech, of course, in Pittsburgh, because these days when you go and you give a economic speech, Pittsburgh has to be the background because steel industry, or it has to be in Detroit because of auto industry. That's just the way it works. I don't make the rules.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Okay.
So, she's going to Pittsburgh, and she's doing this thing, and then she's going to be interviewed by Stephanie Ruhle, and that'll be aired tonight at 7 o'clock on MSNBC.
All right.
And Alex Thompson of Axios, who has it in for her, basically just spends all of his time tweeting and reporting, she did this, she's not doing this, she's not talking to reporters, she made this mistake. That's all he does. It's his entire beat. So today he writes, this will make Harris his second sit-down with somebody who supports her candidacy, Oprah being the other. And then he has Stephanie Ruhle beating the crap out of Brett Stevens on Bill Maher's show, where Stevens says, she has to win my vote. She has to tell me her policy. And Ruhle said, we know Trump's policies, and they're awful. What else do you need to know? What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
So my point is that she's giving an economic speech, and she'll be interviewed by Stephanie Ruhle. And here's your policy. And if this is what you're waiting for, I expect by tonight Brett Stevens will be endorsing her. Otherwise, he's a liar. Well, I know he's a liar, so he's not going to be endorsing her.
Well, this is only one policy. I wanted 7. And why the economic policy? That's just one of several.
It's just merely the most important policy.
Right. Well, it is the economy.
Well, what about her policy on abortion? Well, I'm not a woman. I don't care about that.
Okay.
Well, what other policies are you looking for? So, well, it's not that I'm looking for a specific policy. I just want an excuse.
Right.
This is my shtick. Right. So, it's just weird to get this exposed because they really look even worse than they did when they first brought it up.
Okay. Well, more room for Brett Stevens to look worse.
So as S.V. Date says in response to Alex Thompson, look, the vast majority of Trump's interviews are with his apologists. I don't see any complaints about that. And by the way, 6 weeks out, says S.V. Date, dump the Trump.
Dumpty?
Trump does not have a press pool traveling with him. The only journalists on a plane in his motorcade are handpicked to be there.
Oh.
You see complaints about that in the press? No, it's all about what Harris is doing or not doing.
Yeah, what happened is that I thought that was like the big tradition that everybody loved so much is that they got to travel on the plane with the candidates.
Right. So my view of it, of course, is that by speaking to Stephanie Ruhle, Harris is basically giving the middle finger to male journalists who don't like the way that she approaches the press.
All right.
Good.
Yeah, I guess so. If you get tired, I'll use my finger and you go rest. Right. I'm happy to do it. Okay. All right. Well, people are sad about something, but they're also not getting it from the other guy and they don't care. What do you know?
Anthony D'Esposito.
Yes. Let's
talk Congress.
All right. He's still in it.
We should. We talked Congress on Monday. We started the show with Monday. And I said
we got it right.
What if Mike Smith, whatever the heck his name is, can't get this clean resolution for a continuing resolution to fund the government through the Rules Committee?
Yeah.
And, a decade ago, that was unheard of. Of course he will. It's the Speaker's Committee.
Yeah, he asked people to do it.
Well, he couldn't get it through.
That's right. And,
I'm glad we spent a lot of time talking about it because, he couldn't get it through.
Plan C was, all right, well, then we'll have to do it by suspension of the rules. Yeah, but doesn't that take more votes? Yeah. And then guess what? It's on the calendar today under suspension of the rules.
And it'll pass, and then Chuck Schumer already has it penciled in the Senate in terms of where we're doing it. And not only that, once they do this evening, the House is getting out of town. There are not going to be any votes tomorrow, and they're done.
All right. Yeah, I was a little worried about it because it's kind of fell late in the schedule, and it was one of 6 suspensions. They don't take long suspensions. That's one of the upsides of them. They'll have 40 minutes of debate. So they can do it, and they could stay late if they want to get out of here tomorrow.
Meanwhile, in Congress, for the Brett Stevens of the world,
yes, policy.
Kamala Harris said, this abortion thing is like a big deal.
Yes.
And so I would support a carve-out in the filibuster to get this, reproductive rights thing done.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting to see, and lots of people were excited
also known
by
as
it.
Policy.
Yeah, that's true too, and just sort of.
She doesn't have any policies. Well, she has this
procedural
one. Well, I don't like
wrangling.
that one. Well, then you're lying.
You didn't want to hear about the policies?
No.
Oh.
But see, the thing is, there was all this complaint about, well, you can't do that. Democrats always want to carve things out. Well, the judges and carving out, already with
right. Oh, yeah.
The way that reconciliation works, taxes are not subject to the filibuster if done properly.
Right.
So Republicans always have their interests carved out.
Yes.
So why are they complaining about Democrats doing it?
Because Democrats are doing it.
That's a column by Jonathan Chait. All the lies they told us about the filibuster.
Oh. All right. I know most of those lies.
You do. You're an expert. Why would liberals or moderates accept the existence of a system that makes complex legislation impossible to build, easy to destroy? Who would ever design a system like this? And the answer is nobody really did.
Well, that's true.
It's not in the Constitution.
Right. It just sort of fell into place in the negative. Mm-hmm. But it would be protected by people who don't really want to allow complex legislation and love to destroy it when they see it. Right. Republicans.
So Adam Gentleson has this book, Kill Switch, which is about the rise and repeated mutations of the filibuster.
Oh.
And so he reviews the book a little bit. And by custom, filibusters in the 20th century are reserved for civil rights laws. So that's where a lot of the history comes from.
Yes.
But it's a lie, just like Republicans lie to us about everything.
Yes.
There's no reason
Joe
to keep
Manchin
it. One should
lies about it too. Manchin made headlines on the way out the door. I forgot that he was still there, and he
that's why he made headlines on the way out. He wanted to remind you he's still there.
Right. Yeah, I could be on TV complaining about this later, So
he's Brett Stevens.
Basically.
Right. I wasn't going to vote for Harris, but now my excuse is she's going to get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah.
And the filibuster is the most important thing that keeps this country a democracy, because I'm not going to explain why.
Yeah, it just is.
But if you want to go read Jentleson's book and think about civil rights, I'm not saying it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's almost admirable in a way.
He's given us judges. I'd rather have him there than any Republican from West Virginia.
Right.
But, if he's on the way out, bye.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was startled to even see his name again. Who? Oh, yeah, right. Oh, yeah, he's still there. That's right. Ugh. Well, he has a platform to speak.
Chuck Schumer, Democrats will weigh filibuster reform for abortion rights.
Yeah, well,
if
they'll weigh anything.
The majority.
Yes.
Which would require, it looks like, Texas or Florida, because it doesn't look like Montana's going much our way.
I'll take them both.
Yeah. I'll take them both.
Right. I mean,
so spend some money there.
Guy wants to be in the minority from Montana. That's his business. I would try not to, but I would like not to lose him, tester. But, all right. Well, Montanans, hang on to your senators. Power of incumbency, something. How come this isn't working?
Right. So we got some new polling stuff to go over, and I think a lot of it is important. And then a nice piece from Nate Cohen, which we'll spend some time on. I think we'll do that after the break.
All right.
But when you step back and look at national polling, it is often the case that you get a result. Maybe you like it. It's a 6-point lead for Harris, with Ipsos yesterday, or maybe you don't like it. It's a 1-point lead for Harris with CNN. But you look at the crosstabs, and of course the advice is don't look at the crosstabs.
Right. Don't cross the tabs.
Right. Not even our favorite poll from, what is it, Naked Africa or whatever it's called?
Nude Africa.
Nude Africa, yeah. Don't look at those crosstabs.
Yeah, don't get it confused. Undressed Africa.
There's a new site.
No knockoffs. Yeah. Oh, okay.
It's just so popular. There's a bunch of knockoffs. But in any case, you look at the crosstabs, they don't make any sense. Trump gaining with blacks. How many people did you interview? 4.
Right.
Trump gaining with Jews. How many did you interview? 6.
Okay.
3 of which were in upstate New York and Muncie. So you look. What about Latino? What about Hispanic? How about and it's really hard to make anything of it, and yet tons of ink has been spilled, tons of stories have been written about what these crosstabs say and mean, and how there's a realignment. And you scratch your head and say, but I'm not seeing this in actual votes. Well, you can't make much of the crosstabs. The actual poll is good, but you can't make much of the crosstabs because they don't have enough people unless they specifically focused on these groups. Well, there are some polls out today. 3 of them came, and they do focus on groups. And so let's go over them because some are important.
They're not focused
for Harris's impending victory in November.
Okay.
First is the famous Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics Harvard Youth Poll.
Harvard.
Okay. Because, George Santos obviously is going to be moving to the Institute of Politics.
Probably.
Because they invite everybody. I don't know why. So the Harvard Youth Poll,
I like that they put Harvard
national
in there
poll
twice.
released today this was yesterday, by the Institute of Politics,
Harvard,
indicates that among 18 to 29-year-olds nationwide, Vice President Kamala Harris holds a commanding 31-point lead over Donald Trump.
Oh. Well, all
among
right.
likely voters. The 48th Harvard Youth Poll shows Harris leading Trump 64-32. And in case you were wondering, that's better than the exit poll said Biden did with that particular group. Biden won the group 60-36.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Significant enthusiasm
that,
group between young Democrats and Republicans. 74% of Democrats saying they'll definitely vote compared to 60% of young Republicans. Widening gender gap. Back in September, back in the spring rather, when they did the poll last and Biden was only ahead by a little, there was a 17-point gender gap between men and women. Now it's 30. Harris outperforming Trump.
But he's going to protect them.
Qualities. Harris's job approval has significantly improved. Strong support for progressive policies. Overwhelming rejection of Project 2025. Only 6% viewing it favorably, 48% unfavorably.
That's amazing.
And actually, Republicans rejected 14 favorably, 23 unfavorably. Wow. The impact of social media, with 53% of young adults encountering memes about Harris online in the last month. 34% of whom said it positively influenced this group. 56% have seen memes about Trump. 26% reporting negative influence.
Okay.
So, key takeaways. Harris is doing great among the kids.
All right.
So
maybe they're all right.
Whatever your crosstabs say in those national polls.
Right.
Next group.
Yeah.
This is from Pew. Pew Identity. 57% of Latino registered voters support Harris for president, while 39% back Trump. That's very similar to 2020 when Latino validated voters backed Biden over Trump, 59-38. Now she's 57-39.
Who won in 2020?
Joe Biden did.
Okay.
So it doesn't look like Trump is gaining and the Democrats are cratering in that group.
That was my question. Okay. Now I remember. Yes, he did win, didn't he? That's terrific.
Yeah. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about that particular group. They're very important, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that poll. I'm going to do the next one, the third big demographic group, which I think is important and underrated. Nobody underrates Latinos, Hispanics. We all know how important they are.
Slovakians.
And no, I don't have a group of Polish voters in Pennsylvania who are both. I don't have that. What I do have is the 2024 Asian American Vote Survey by National Opinion Research Center, Newark. Harris 66, Trump 28. The same poll in April-May showed Biden at 45 and Trump at 31.
Okay, interesting. So some coming to the senses for everybody.
So really interesting stuff in that poll. 66% of Asian American voters plan on voting for Harris compared to 28% who say they back Trump. Those who say they will support another candidate, 6.
Who?
In 2020, same survey. 54 said they plan to vote for Biden, 30% for Trump. So that's an improvement for Harris. 16% for somebody else who were undecided. Now it's only 6.
Who else was there even in 2020? I don't know, but okay.
I don't know.
They were excited about it.
So voter contact and outreach, Asian American voters are far more likely to say they've been contacted by the Democratic Party than the GOP. Remember, the get out the vote stuff on the GOP was canned when Romney McDaniel was fired. And it was outsourced to
Charlie Kirk, I think.
Yeah, Turning Point USA.
Well,
so basically,
he ate that money.
Not doing anything. They're just taking the money because everything about the Republican Party is a grip these days. Harris's identity, Asian American voters say Harris's identity as a woman's more important to her identity as Asian Indian or South Asian. And by the way, as an aside, Asian Americans have been a rapidly growing group of eligible voters in the U.S. over the past 2 decades, growing by 15% in the last 4 years alone and turning out in record numbers in every federal election since 2016. In 2020, a surge in voters, especially those voting for the first time in battleground states, was crucial to Biden's victory because when you win, every group that votes for you is crucial to your victory.
Yes.
that's what you do.
Assuming the victory was close. But, always, you acknowledge everybody.
Right. And since we only have a couple of minutes before the break, I'm going to save the great Nate Cohen piece.
Okay.
I don't know if Nate Cohen is great, but it's a great piece. AP photos here of the villages in Florida with
Which ones?
Golf. What do they call them? Golf caddies. They don't call them golf carts the way we do up here.
Oh, no? Oh, I don't know.
They're
golf UFOs.
We call them golf carts, but they call them
mobility scooters? Is that what we're talking about?
That. In any case, Democrats are becoming a force in traditionally conservative The Villages. So it's a Harris Waltz parade.
Right. The Ukraine.
To do there. The Villages, one of the world's largest retirement communities, has long been known as a conservative stronghold. In the past, left-leaning residents have tended to keep their views to themselves, fearing they might be kicked out of the golf group, excluded from the Mahjong club, or disinvited from a neighborhood pool party. But Harris's emergence as the Democratic Party's presidential candidate has given the small but enthusiastic group a boost of confidence and a push into the light.
Well, all right.
The Democratic Club in the Villages has seen its membership double since the 2020 election.
Good.
From 2 to 4. It's gone to about 1,500 people now, which is tiny. Parades of golf carts decorated in support of Harris have rolled through the streets, and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff recently paid a visit. So there's another underreported demographic.
Yeah.
The thing is, again, you have to remember, the larger samples allow you to say this about the national polls, whereas the smaller samples don't. Don't believe necessarily everything you see there about black voters or Asian American voters, but white voters are trending toward Harris compared to 2016 and 2020, and that's good. So if she also picks up these other demographics, including the Villages vote, that's really good for her.
Yeah. Can't hurt to have extra votes in Florida. Everybody loves their electric vehicles there.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here in Netroots Radio. I don't know if we're done with the Village people.
We're done with the Village people, yeah.
But very exciting news that there's a Harris Waltz place for them. Yes, okay. And you looked up their alternative version of golf carts. They just dropped
They call them golf cars.
And call them golf cars. I don't know why that is. Or whether it happens elsewhere or not, but I don't know. But anyway, okay. Wonderful, terrific. They've got them all decorated up and they're feeling good. That's nice. Some of these people weren't old yet last time.
Right.
And now they're new and they have a golf car and they want to use it.
So some interesting polling. There's going to be a ton of Pennsylvania polling this morning. There's going to be at least 4 polls. We already have Muhlenberg, which is a tie, and that's actually an improvement from their last one for Harris. But we're expecting Susquehanna. We're expecting Monmouth. Susquehanna's in-state, Monmouth is national. But they're all doing Pennsylvania.
Is Monmouth okay? But yeah, well, Susquehanna
Monmouth is a national thing that's coming into Pennsylvania to do it.
I see.
As
They're
if
coming in from out of state.
Coming from out of state.
Okay.
Whereas Susquehanna's in-state.
Yes.
And I think RMG, which is Rasmussen's new polling shop, is also going to do Pennsylvania today. So we'll have at least 4 polls. There's also an unusual poll from Nebraska.
Well, they are unusual.
done by Survey USA.
It's a unicameral
I think it may be
survey.
an internal poll, but nonetheless, it's interesting. Trump 56, Harris 40. That's not surprising for Nebraska. But in Nebraska 2, which is going to remain as is.
Yeah, unless they somehow just declare martial law or whatever.
Nope.
You never know.
No martial law.
Okay.
No martial of the Supreme Court to change things. Biden won Nebraska 2 with its single electoral vote, with the other 4 in Nebraska going to Trump.
Sounds like a baseball score. Biden won,
Nebraska 2. Now there's going to be 3. But Harris is up by 15 in the Survey USA.
So she
that's,
should get
that's
that
like 10 points better than 2020.
Vote.
So that's actually pretty good.
No wonder they were so interested in taking it away, but now it looks too obvious, and the will of the Nebraska 2 voters would be thwarted directly. I mean, it doesn't matter to most of the Republicans there, but one guy who was apparently a Republican, newly minted Republican who switched from the Democratic side for some strange reason, had a pang of there's still a little bit of his soul left in there, I guess.
His name, I think, is Mike McDonald. And
sure.
He was originally a Democrat
thinking.
for a long, long time.
All right.
But he's very conservative. And if I recall correctly, he may be Catholic conservative, so he's very anti-abortion, anti-choice.
Okay. I see.
He's a conservative.
Yes.
And the Democratic Party condemned him for his social views.
You should not do this, sir.
So he switched to being a Republican.
All right.
There's a lesson in there for you kids. If you want a big tent, don't do things like that.
Okay.
Because politics at the local level is personal, sometimes venal.
Yeah.
As opposed to cardinal. And, if you do stuff like that, it's going to come back to bite you. So he changed over to the Republican Party. Okay, fine. But at heart, he still has a conscience.
Yeah,
and he's still a decent person. And perhaps more importantly, he wants to run for mayor of Omaha.
Oh, okay. Oh, so he can't thwart the will of Omaha voters.
So he was asked to vote with his fellow Republicans in order to make Nebraska a winner-take-all state. Mm-hmm. And he said, if I do that, I'll never be able to win in Omaha, which is Harris plus 15.
Yes.
So I'm against it.
Okay.
And the governor announced yesterday, I'm not calling a special session. We're not doing it. It's too close to the election, which you can translate as we don't have the votes.
Okay, yes. I mean, they don't care about it being too close to the election.
No,
but it's a nice excuse.
If they had the votes,
the excuse there should be for this. But all right, so good. I'm glad because it was a very tricky situation. There was a moment there where they were saying, "Aha, we fooled you,
the insider
man."
said they don't have the votes. They're just doing this because Trump wants them to. So he's sending Lindsey Graham because Trump wants him to.
Yeah.
And so it's all performative for Trump, but it's not happening.
Good.
And basically, the governor said, I can't vote for Kamala Harris because it's too close to the election. That's my excuse.
I mean, you don't have to, sir. But okay.
Well, but it's the Bret Stephens out.
Yeah, I guess.
I would like to vote for her.
It's not because she's a woman or
I would like to vote for her, but she won't tell me about her policies. Well, she's just laid out 15 policies. Yes, but she didn't come to my door personally and discuss it with me over dinner. So therefore, it doesn't count. So anyway, that's not happening. But that I thought was a very, very interesting poll.
Yeah.
Of what's going on there. Oh, and by the way,
helps explain the electoral vote outcome.
Right. They also had a Senate poll, and I think their senator is Deb Fischer, and she's at 44.
Maybe.
And then running against an independent, because you can't run as a Democrat there, named Osborne. And Osborne has 45.
All right.
So that was a very interesting.
Just one of those one-name people like Madonna?
So it's probably not, like super take it to the bank. But what'll be interesting is that if Osborne really is that close, and it looks like it's a real race, and there's other indications that might be the case, then you would expect the Republicans to dump like $1 gazillion in Nebraska in the Senate race.
All right.
And Osborne will get swamped. He doesn't have the funds to keep up with this. He's not even a Democrat. And the Democrats can't fund it because then it's obviously he's being funded by the Democrats. You can't do that here in Nebraska. So, he's sort of a I can't see how he wins situation, but
sign the check as
just,
RFK
I thought
Jr.
I would mention that.
Yeah. Why don't we just send them all the money and say it wasn't us, it was RFK Jr. Mm-hmm. Can we do that? Is that legal?
I don't know.
Does it matter? Are there ways to prosecute people for political crimes now?
I don't know.
Okay. Try it out, everybody.
Anyway, all of it is, I think, interesting and interesting stuff. When you look at the state polls like Pennsylvania, they've been running, close, perhaps leaning Harris, slight edge to Harris, you might say. And that's true in Michigan, and that's true in Wisconsin, but they're all close. But Nate Cohn has this really interesting piece today.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes.
Which is the Republicans' Electoral College edge, once seen as ironclad, looks to be fading.
I've heard this.
A review of the evidence that Donald Trump's advantage relative to the national popular vote has declined significantly. Growing evidence to support a surprising possibility, not surprising to people on this show because we've talked about it.
Yes.
His once formidable advantage in Electoral College is not as ironclad. In 2016, he had an Electoral College advantage of 2.9 points. Again, it's not 4. It was 2.9 in 2016. In 2020, it was 3.8. That's where this myth that, it's inevitable and historical that the Republicans have a 4. Democrats have to win by more than 4 in order to win.
That was just, I guess, maybe the first time that anybody ever put a number to it. So
and it was 3.8.
That was
so
the number.
Right 4, and the Democrat won.
Okay.
And that's because the national vote was D 4.5 and the tipping point state was D 0.6, which I think was Wisconsin.
Okay.
In 2024, according to the polls, that Republican lead in the Electoral College is 0.7 points.
Wow. Well, that's
so a 2.5 point lead for Harris or a 4 point lead for Harris. If you look at the high quality polls, it's more than enough to win.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I didn't realize that it was so changeable, and I guess it's the sort of thing that people. There was no reason. Nobody reported about how it was calculated. Just that the number was around 4. So I guess it has always been
right.
Like
but
how many votes
how
it takes to pass things in the Senate.
At the same time, he says something that I just thought was really interesting. We've talked on the show about why that probably is. Right. Yes. For example, New York State Democrats suck.
Okay.
They have Kathy Hochul and Eric Adams.
Yes.
Right. When Andrew Cuomo was there, they made a deal with Republicans to give a rump Democratic group would work with Republicans to keep a majority in the state house there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just awful. They're awful people. When they're not corrupt, they're just incompetent. So it's not surprising that Republicans are doing better in places like New York than they did traditionally 8 years ago. So if Trump is picking up votes, picking up, quote, strength, end quote, it's going to be in places like New York or California or Florida, which are populous states that nonetheless, this extra support for Trump isn't going to change the outcome.
Right.
New York's still going to go Democratic in the presidential election, just, maybe by 15 instead of 25. California, same. Florida, probably same. And that's how you can explain that, Trump looks to be doing okay in certain places, but not in other places. But Nate Cohn takes it one step further.
All right.
And he says, you might be under the impression that Republicans do so well in the Electoral College because of the disproportionate power afforded to small rural states. But that's not really what's going on. Instead, the most distorting feature, it's almost entirely winner take all. You get all the electoral votes from a state if you win it by a single vote.
Yeah, all right.
So Trump narrowly prevails in Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin in 2016. He gets 75 electoral college votes. Clinton gets none. And Clinton did very well in non-competitive states, not just big blue states like California. She also did pretty well in Texas. She gained 7 points compared to Barack Obama. It didn't matter. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Right? And those gains help her win the popular vote but they did nothing to help in the Electoral College.
Right.
Right? So Trump's declining Electoral College gap today has a lot to do with his relative weakness in the core battlegrounds. But he's pretty strong in the non-competitive states. So Harris leading in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, that matters. Okay, but Harris is doing about 2 points worse than Biden did, and that's because Trump is gaining in places like New York and California.
All right.
Okay, and so, yeah, we've observed this, but here's where it gets really interesting. The midterm election didn't turn out to be a red wave, Nate Cohen writes. Democrats held firm in key battleground states, but a red wave really did materialize in many parts of the country, like Long Island. Republicans ran far ahead of Trump's 2020 performance in New York, Florida, and much of the Deep South. And they ran well ahead of Mr. Trump, say by 5 to 10 points in the House popular vote, in less competitive states across the South and West, California, Texas. And as a result, Republicans won the popular vote for the U.S. House, even though Democrats are only a few states away from retaining control of it. So Trump is excelling in many of the places where Republicans won big in 2022. And New York Times Siena poll supports that. And then he goes into, well, why can't you just look at state polls and figure out what's going on? And he says something that's really interesting. There's very little state polling outside the battleground states. In New York, there's evidence Harris is struggling a bit, relatively speaking. Their methodology at Siena is different than the Times Siena poll. If Siena College alone does a poll that's not sponsored by the New York Times, but not so different that it counts as independent corroboration. On the other hand, Harris holds up relatively well in most of Texas, Florida, and California. So it's not a very straightforward picture. And again, my thesis is New York Democrats suck, and so that's part of a lot of this. There's another issue with the state polling. By 2-to-1 margin, the polls you see nowadays are weighted by recall vote. And that means the number of respondents who say they voted for Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump, and it's adjusted to match the actual result of the last election. What that means is that 2 out of 3 polls that you see, whether they're national or state, and this is important, are going to be adjusted to reflect the constituency of 2020 because they adjust for whether or not, I want the same number of Biden voters and Trump voters as was in the election in 2020.
But they don't have them.
They may not be the same, and they changed in 2022. And Nate Cohen's whole thesis is this electorate probably looks closer to 2022 than 2020, which is good news for Harris in the battlegrounds and bad news for Harris overall in the national vote. And that's why the gap is closed.
Well, it is a bit confusing because of the number of parts to it, but each one individually, I think, makes sense.
But they all fit together.
Yeah. And I mean, it's certainly common sense to say, well, why would the electorate be closer to 2020 than 2022? Aren't we closer to 22, in time?
Yeah, but it's not a presidential election, so the same group of people don't turn out.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Right, we all know that 2020 had more people show up, and every 4 years more people show up. And so, if you're running as a governor, you want the partisan strength of your presidential ticket to help carry you to victory, et cetera, et cetera. You don't have that in Virginia, but the rest of the country does.
Not New Jersey.
Yeah. So he said, well, why did the Republicans do so well in some places but not others back in 2022? At the time, he writes, the best explanation seemed to be about the issues at stake. In many key battlegrounds, the Republicans nominated MAGA backstop the steal candidates and threatened to take away abortion rights. When they did that, Democrats did great.
Yeah, at least they didn't do that this time.
Right, but elsewhere the story was different. So in blue states, abortion rights seemed safe.
Yeah.
Right. The threat of a stolen election seemed distant. And so voters were concerned about local issues, crime, housing, homelessness, resentful of pandemic-era restrictions, inflation. Yeah. And then many conservative and more religious states didn't care about any of that, and so they were going to go red wave. And none of it necessarily seemed likely to affect the national presidential election, but if the 2022 pattern really holds, it might suggest that the shifts in the midterms weren't just about the issues, focused on by different candidates in different states, but how new issues altered people's political allegiances. Mm-hmm. Younger voters, for example. You could make an argument that, the pandemic really screwed them, so they're not so keen on Democrats. Well, actually, Republicans were leading the country at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's a little more complicated than that. But what he says would suggest that the social, economic, and political upheaval in the wake of the pandemic, inflation, January 6th, and the end of Roe left a lasting political impact, and we really haven't figured out exactly how that all feels. But it may not be 2020 anymore.
Well, it shouldn't be.
So with the polling predictably focused on the battlegrounds, we may not have a great idea of this until after the final results arrive in November. But if the results wind up looking somewhat more like the midterms, I won't be surprised. Crazier things have happened. It's a really interesting thesis and makes you look at the polling differently.
Not super crazy at all. I understand that it was a different kind of election, et cetera, but I mean, at a minimum, you say, well, I could balance that against the fact that it was just 2 years ago and the other one was 4 years ago. And also a lot of the people who voted the way they did.
And for a lot of the issues.
Yeah.
But for the turnout's always greater every 4 years.
It's greater.
So the off-year election, as they like to call it, is always less, and therefore they tell you, well, you can't compare 2022 to a Democratic or Republican, race in a presidential year. And Nate Cohn is saying, well, maybe you can.
Yeah, okay, I'm with him for that, and maybe you can, especially as the pollsters are out there trying to figure, well, who's really definitely going to show up? Well, the answer is the people who came in 22.
Well, let's adjust it to 2020. Well, what about all those new people in Georgia that are registering since Harris became the candidate? How do you figure for that? Well, we don't.
I don't know how they do that to do it fairly. They just have to figure something out. But
especially if, like New York Times Siena, they use the voter rolls to decide who they're even going to poll.
Yeah.
They
can't, so they'll miss them entirely.
Yes.
Yeah,
which may be why New York Times Siena is a little more conservative than some of the other polls.
Could be.
But at the same time, they may well be picking up the fact that there isn't an electoral college advantage anymore for Republicans. And so when Harris is ahead by 3, that's enough to win.
Okay. Well, that's probably your best shot at reforming or getting rid of the electoral college. Make Republicans lose. Then they'll realize how unfair it is.
Mm.
So, of course, that doesn't prevent them from building something worse. But, right now they love it. When they lose, they'll figure out how terrible it really was.
Right. Well, that's basically how they do it.
All right.
So, for those of you trying to interpret, for example, the polling these days.
That's you.
Well, everybody's looking at polls. You get polls.
We're listening.
Polls? I'll give you a poll.
Yeah.
I think that Ipsos came out yesterday. Harris is leading by 6, nationally.
Okay, I'll take that one.
Well, throw it on the pile. That's why you do these aggregates. But, keep in mind, for this year especially, it's going to be really difficult to know exactly what kind of polling error we have this year until after the election. And I'm sure we're going to have one. I don't think the polls are going to nail everything because there's just too many moving parts here, as Nate Cohn really well laid out.
Yeah. Well, there's too many polls, in my opinion. So, one of them is going to get it right. And at random, someone will be able to claim being the most accurate pollster. And, it may be random. They may also have done another poll. Hey, but your poll from the week before was terrible. Yeah, right. But this one really nailed it.
Mm.
All right. I mean, that's the game, I guess.
So here's a new one from a group called Focal Data HQ. 538 rank, not available because they're relatively new.
All right.
Looks like they're probably using some online method for collecting their information because they've got 8,678 likely voters polled between September 3rd and September 16th.
What?
Wisconsin, Harris plus 5.4. Pennsylvania, Harris plus 1.9. Arizona, Harris 1.6. Nevada, Harris 1.5. Georgia, Harris 1.2. Michigan, Harris 0.7. North Carolina, Trump 5.6. Ohio, Trump 6.6. Sort of unbelievable. I don't believe that Harris is up by 5 in Wisconsin. I don't believe that she's down 5 in North Carolina.
Not now. I don't. That's also honest. I mean, by polling standards, that's ancient data.
Yeah.
I mean, September 5th?
September 3rd through 16. That's like last week.
Yeah. We didn't even know about Nude Africa then.
Yeah.
That's
right.
The game changer.
That's exactly right. That's prior to the national spotlight on Mark Robinson.
Yes, right. Nude game changer.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that really will have changed the numbers in North Carolina. I'm positive of that.
Right.
But yeah, also, I don't know that I believe that any of those leads necessarily have been retained, but it was also sort of at the last minute of the big excitement and hype for the Democratic ticket. So, I mean, they were going to get some inflated numbers there, I think. Bounce numbers.
Yeah, maybe, if there is a bounce. And nobody's really sure there really is a bounce.
Nude bounce. We're positive. We know about it.
Right.
Okay. But, I don't know necessarily that, well, who knows? They have no track record. What can we even make of this?
Right.
They
And
throw
there's
it on
so
the
many
pile,
new
as you
ones
said.
coming
You're
on.
right.
So basically, if you look at the 538 aggregate, which does weighting of whether they've ever heard of you or not, Harris is about a 2.5-point lead. It's down from 2.9. The difference between 2.5 and 2.9 in polls like this is nothing. Remember margin of error? Margin of error is usually about 3 in these polls. And to say something is outside the margin of error, you need like a 6-point lead. So when you change, in a poll from -1 to +1, it's no change at all. Right. That's just random sampling.
Yeah, the only way to change that and to get a different result is like something like North Carolina, where deviation is standard, I guess.
Right. So again, the last couple of polls nationally, September 19 through 22, and that was the earliest of them. Quinnipiac was even. Morning Consult, Harris +5. Ipsos Reuters, Harris +6. ActiVote, which I don't believe because it's all online. They don't verify who they're saying is a voter. Harris +3. So you get this 2.5 Harris lead. That's where it stands. And then Pennsylvania is going to be more interesting to talk about tomorrow. And we do have a show tomorrow, right? So
yes.
By then we'll have the results
from
all of this. Right now, Harris has a 1.3% lead, a 1.3 point lead in the 538 aggregate. And right now we have Muhlenberg calling it even, Redfield and Wilton, Republican-leaning firm for the Telegraph from England, even. Emerson calls it even. Mass Inc., which is Steve Kozala, very good pollster, has Harris up 5. And then we're waiting on Susquehanna, and we're waiting on at least 2 other polls, RMG, and at least one other, Monmouth. Okay. And then we'll see what's going on Pennsylvania. We'll talk about Pennsylvania tomorrow.
Well, I guess we'll be talking about Pennsylvania every day.
Yeah, well, it's important, but so are Wisconsin and Michigan.
Right. Well, Wisconsin's crucial.
But still, if you step back and look at the overall state of the race, points are Harris is doing what she needs to do with the youth vote. Harris is doing what she needs to do with the Latino vote. Harris is doing what she needs to do with the Asian American vote. Harris has always been doing what she needs to do with the white vote. You put that together, she's doing, she's hitting her mark. So she should win.
Votes. Yes. Well, she's doing what she needs to do. She just needs to do more of it, and more of her surrogates need to be able to do it. That's where
she needs to do more
donations come in.
Well, she needs to have policy.
Wow.
Well, she's doing more policy.
I don't know
if I can vote for her because it's too close to the election. Shut up and stop.
It is said that more doors need to be knocked on and more literature needs to be passed out. I want to know about her policies. Well, here's
September.
A card. Yeah. So, but I keep hearing stories about that effort not getting the funding that it needs. I think this is a perpetual
everybody
issue.
Complains about that every year.
Yes. So perennially it gets funded late after the game or bills are paid after the fact. But really, and so it's no different in that sense.
I mean, my
from
favorite
other years
is like Chuck Rocha.
Oh.
ROCHA.
Okay.
Florida, Democratic outreach guy.
Chuck Amond Rocha. Yes.
So the point is, if you Google him every 4 years, we're not getting enough money.
Yeah. Well, just look in your email.
Every 4 years, everybody else says, you're wasting your money on that guy. And everybody says it's supposed to.
Oh, yeah.
But every 4 years, you're not getting enough money.
Well, you're not.
When people say we're not getting enough money for our outreach, I believe it. But at the same time,
Yes.
You're asking for money. So what are you going to say? We have too much money. Stop sending us money. You're not going to say that.
That's how I do my fundraising, which is why it sucks. Don't send me money. I'm very wealthy. Okay.
That's why
that's
I'm
a bad pitch.
Not Stephanie's rule.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you got to have it down to an art. But they are always constantly underfunded, and that is true.
It's true.
The money comes down later
because. Well, of course they could ask for money.
Yeah, and they need it, and it's true. And really, I mean, to understand the pitch of it right now, is well, they'll plan a more ambitious local outreach campaign. The less they're behind, they're always going to be behind. You can't make up the deficit, but the money comes down after the fact, and they pay the bills later. But if you are if you can pay some of the bills up front, usually what they'll say is, oh, well, I thought we could only afford $20 million in this outreach. Let's spend 30 because money will be coming later. They'll be behind on their budget by design, but they will shift their budget forward if you send them money a little earlier, like now.
Well, the question on the table is, will it make a difference?
Okay.
So I just sent you the 538 graph of Harris's lead over time. That's the thing at the bottom there.
I can't enlarge it big enough to see the difference. Okay. Yeah.
All right, but forget about being able to see the difference.
What's that other line?
To go back to our favorite Ghostbusters analogy.
Yes. Oh, crossing
the streams never cross.
Yeah.
At least not since Harris took over.
I don't. Yeah. So this is Harris versus Trump going all the way back to August, early August, and yeah, the closest they come to a Trump lead is, well, he's almost tied in early August, and then after
late July.
Nope. Okay.
It's really late July.
Oh, okay.
And so,
I guess it is.
Because it's the week before August 4th. So what happened in late July? Well, Harris hadn't really consolidated yet.
Yeah, I guess
so.
Not.
My point is that, it's a slim lead, but it's a consistent lead. And it reminds me a lot of North Carolina polling over the years, where we always talked about that. A 3-point lead in North Carolina is like permanent because the streams never cross.
Yeah.
That's what this looks like.
That's what it looks like. That's what it used to look like in North Carolina before nude Africa, ladies and gentlemen. And that'll change everything. I hope. I don't know. It would be a serious waste of time if nothing changed there. But
anyway, that's today's show because that's all David could afford. So we got
send money and we'll buy extra time. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This just in from Connecticut. The reason the bear is no longer menacing the Dworkin household. RFK Jr. has been by and has eaten the bear, and sad news. We enjoyed the bear as menacing as he was. He was just a big, cute doofus, but now he's in a freezer at the RFK compound, I guess, or possibly in the bushes at Central Park. He's a big respecter of his animal friends. Okay. Well, I don't know what brought that on. Oh, yes. It was the chart that Greg sent me from to take a look at the consistency of the Harris lead over time has another unidentified line, a gray line, just down near the bottom, hovering around 5-4 something % of the vote. And it's not identified, but we figured it must be Kennedy. And the line stops around somewhere in between August 18th and August 25th, which I guess would be about the time that he dropped out. So that's why it stops. But they didn't even bother to label it anymore. Just trying to figure things out. All right. Well, now we know who's ahead in Pennsylvania. The same person who was ahead of Pennsylvania yesterday. All right. Other things to catch up on. Let's go back and give you the details on how creepy Johnny McEntee is. Nude Johnny McEntee is the new website. Everyone's crazy about it. It's in Wired magazine. Can I read the full report out of Wired magazine? I don't know. They're making this one available if they have a paywall normally. Teens say that Trump's former personal aide and who knows what that means, and Project 2025 higher-up, that's the same person, McEntee, made them uncomfortable in chats. How so? Two women tell Wired that when they were 18-year-old college freshmen, John McEntee, a former Trump administration official and co-founder of a Peter Thiel-backed dating app, always trouble if you're involved in the development of a dating app, behaved in ways they considered inappropriate in online conversations. That is to say, though, in ways that Mark Robinson would not consider inappropriate in any setting. But you know about him and his nude Africa thing. In October of 2023, when Grace Carter was an 18-year-old freshman at North Carolina State University, she received messages on Instagram from the business account of the conservative dating app, The Right Stuff. Remember, ever heard of this one? I mean, I think I've heard of it before. And it was, women these days, they won't, I think they were complaining. It was sort of like an incel complaint. They won't date conservatives. We need an app that's just for conservatives. They won't date conservatives, and that's because they're, concerned about their reproductive rights and don't really want to spend time with people who hate them and want to denigrate them and enslave them. Oh, well, that's a problem. We need to create an app for people to get together and have dates where abusers can find people willing to be abused. So The Right Stuff was created. It was reaching out, this business account from The Right Stuff, reaching out to ask if she wanted some merchandise, which seems normal enough, right? Although a message on Instagram, normally that's, email spam you would get. But this time they decided they would market it directly through messages on Instagram. You want to buy any Right Stuff merchandise? Carter didn't know much about the app, so probably not, but was interested in a free hoodie. She needed clothing, I guess, or whatever. And as it turned out, she wasn't just corresponding with a brand manager doing this on behalf of the co-founder of the Right Stuff app, but actually with John McEntee, the app's co-founder, a former official in the Donald Trump administration, and at one point a senior advisor to Project 2025. He's basically out hawking hoodies for his dating app. And this, by the way, in addition to his driving around in his car with counterfeit money to give out to homeless people who are panhandling, and then calling the police in the hopes that they will be picked up for passing bad bills. You remember that story? That was him. Same guy. And if you don't remember that, then you might remember his being fired from his first White House job, sort of as Trump's body man. He parlayed the quarterback gig and diploma from UConn into a gig carrying things for Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump said, "You're carrying things so beautifully. You've never dropped any of them even once. How would you like to be, how would you like a major policy position in my next administration for Brett Stevens' sake? I need to see more policy." Well, okay, fine. I don't want to vote for Trump because I don't like him, but you got to show me more policy, even if the policy is made by a guy who's most famous for carrying stuff, or previously was more famous for getting other people to carry stuff for him. Here, take this ball. I don't want it. They're going to tackle me. You take it. Okay, good job. Anyway, so counterfeiter, which, by the way, I know we mentioned this when that story broke too. The Secret Service still, I think, in charge of anti-counterfeiting in this country, and of course presidential protection. But if one hand, ever talks to the other, if the left hand of the Secret Service speaks to the right hand of the Secret Service, do you think they ever tell them, by the way, those of you who are on the presidential protection details, there's a guy that we're currently investigating for counterfeiting over here, and his job apparently is to be next to and have personal contact every day with one of your protectees. We're watching him for counterfeiting. Just a heads up. But if they were giving heads up, then probably they wouldn't have had that guy take a shot at Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania either. So, okay. All sorts of trouble happening. Anyway, the point is, Grace Carter, the 18-year-old freshman that Johnny here decided to hit on, was interested in a free hoodie. So she entered and engaged in this conversation with somebody who seemed to be working for The Right Stuff, but turned out to be the founder of The Right Stuff. So obviously the operation had grown tremendously, and he was creating lots of jobs for people, even if they were all going to illegal aliens, as Donald Trump likes to claim. I don't think we even brought that up on the air. One of his dumb over-the-weekend speeches that, think about it, every job created in the last, I don't remember how many years he put it, was gone to an illegal alien. No Americans have gotten any jobs at all in the last 2 years, apparently. Anyway, doesn't matter. In messages sent to Carter and to another young woman and reviewed by Wired, McEntee pushed conversations in directions that made them extremely uncomfortable and invited both, one of them repeatedly, to visit him in Los Angeles. Like, when was the last time you were just minding your own business? You got a message, hey, I'm the, whatever. I don't know what he claimed to be, the co-founder, or whether he said who he was. But I'm from The Right Stuff. It's a dating app that, by our data, you signed up for, but you never used. How would you like to buy a hoodie? Maybe I might like to have a free hoodie. I'd like to get a free hoodie. Well, why don't you fly out here to Los Angeles and have sex with me, and I'll give you a free hoodie. Like, for me, end of engagement there. I assume he was a little more subtle and brought it around more slowly, but essentially that's what's going on here, I guess. Neither McEntee nor The Right Stuff responded to repeated requests for comment about this stupid thing. McEntee, 34, in case you were wondering, it does say here in Wired magazine, a former quarterback at the University of Connecticut who served as a personal aide to Trump at the beginning of his presidency. He was reportedly fired in 2018 after his security clearance was denied. He's been next to the president of the United States every day for 2 years before they realized, oh my God, this guy has no business being anywhere near him. No security clearance. That, according to The Atlantic and the Wall Street Journal, which reported that he had deposited large sums of money from online gambling winnings and had mishandled his taxes. And while that might make him personally attractive to Donald Trump, that'll get you dinged in the security clearance area, because you are then what? Subject to bribing. And this is the administration most subject to bribing in American history. In fact, the whole thing was run on a bribe right from the very beginning. Well, anyway, he would later say under oath in a deposition related to January 6th that he resigned in 2018. But in February of 2020, he returned to the White House, this time as Director of White House Presidential Personnel. The director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office. But of course, what do they direct? Presidential personnel. Reflecting his stature in Trump's inner circle, The Atlantic's profile refers to him as the unofficial, quote, deputy president. And in the headline as, quote, the man who made January 6th possible. Wow. And he's also a sex pest. Who knew? Oh, you would have guessed? You should have. In May of 2023, the Heritage Foundation, which did not respond to a request for comment for this piece, I guess, announced that McEntee would be joining the Project 2025 team as a senior advisor because he had carried things around before. Project 2025, of course, is a roadmap for a second Trump administration. It would radically roll back the rights of women and LGBTQIA plus people. That's the standard for Wired magazine. That's the way they express it. And would unwind protection for racial minorities, among many other policy recommendations. The plan also promotes biblical morality, of course. That includes a heteronormative view of marriage and criminalizes pornography. Look out for Mark Robinson there. The announcement noted that McEntee would be, quote, supporting the personnel pillar, unquote, of Project 2025, an effort to staff a second Trump administration with loyalists. McEntee, in addition, was and is the face of The Right Stuff, that dating app for conservatives. It launched in 2022 with backing from billionaire Peter Thiel, who appears to be the company's only investor. At its initial launch, the app faced criticism for being filled with mostly men. Some users alleged that there was a screening question on the app about the January 6, 2021 insurrection. That's interesting, too. Yeah, but it would be, of course, mostly attractive to the men. Oh, you can get a woman who will just shut up and do whatever you say. Really? I can get one of them there? Well, as soon as some women like that sign up, but we're having difficulty finding people who just want to be told to shut the F up. But, there are a few. While the app might not be taking off, oh my gosh, Peter Thiel made a bad investment? I can't believe it. McEntee's profile has nonetheless risen online, with McEntee featured in nearly every video. The Right Stuff has 3.3 million followers on TikTok and 1.8 million on Instagram. The account's posts almost exclusively show McEntee usually eating food in situations staged to make it seem like he's being filmed while on a date, offering quippy conservative takes, attempting to debunk liberal logic. And it's super successful. He is on dates for his own dating app at the age, what did they say, of 34. Power player in a presidential administration, former college quarterback. I mean, come on. And I don't know, somehow just not able to land the right girl for some strange reason. Anyway, what else does it say? Oh, so he films himself pretending to be on dates. So I don't even know whether he actually is going on. He's on any dates. He's not married. He's pretending to go on dates and videotaping it. Who is he on a date with? You wouldn't know her. She's Canadian. The account's posts almost exclusively show McEntee, right, eating food in situations staged to make it look like he's on a date, and debunking liberal logic. A great date chatter. In one video with a caption that says it is a joke, McEntee, now it says that, I guess, claims he gives fake money to homeless people so when they go to use it, they get arrested. That's a good joke. When Grace Carter, back to her, that's what this is about. It's a story about Grace Carter. Remember Grace Carter? When Grace Carter heard from the Right Stuff's account on Instagram, the person controlling the account introduced himself as John. Could be anyone. He offered a phone number with a Southern California area code, a number that a Wired reporter has used in the past to contact McEntee. So I guess it's McEntee. There was no obvious reason why he would have reached out to her in particular. I mean, she may or may not, I don't know, let's see if she even signed up for the dating app. But of course, on Instagram, you go around, you see pictures of people all the time. That's the whole point of Instagram. And he probably just was shopping. I like the look of this one. I'm just going to hit on her and give her my phone number. There was no obvious reason why he would have reached out to her in particular. At the time he contacted her, Carter had about 17,000 followers on TikTok, she says, and still has only a modest 1,500 on Instagram. I actually have no idea how he found me, she says. Based on the other accounts I follow and things I post, it's very leftist, so I was surprised when he found me. I'm sure he wasn't looking at what you were writing, but okay. Carter says she never used McEntee's phone number, though she did accept his offer of a free branded hoodie. While messages viewed by Wired indicate that Carter sparsely responded to McEntee, he repeatedly offered to fly her and a girlfriend to Los Angeles. My treat, he wrote, and what a treat it would have been, don't you think? I remember I told my boyfriend about it, and I was joking that he was going to be the other girl, says Carter, who says that she continued to talk to McEntee as a kind of trolling. I was like, I could use a free trip. That's initially why I kept the conversation going. Oh, girl, you're going to get murdered like that. What's wrong with you? Holy mackerel. I mean, of course, the real problem is the murderers, but, don't engage. Holy cow. It's certainly not worth a free hoodie. And if you were actually considering hey, it's a free trip, oh my God. Unless you were bringing the Secret Service with you. And even then, you might be in trouble because he might have the Secret Service with him. Anyway, in a messages seen by Wired, McEntee says to Carter, I think you're a liberal, but tells her, as long as you'll be fun, I don't care. The conversation, she says, died out after Carter declined to visit McEntee over her winter break. I would have been uncomfortable with him in person, she says. Only you have some sense in your head. Good. Following the presidential debate on September 10th, This is recent, I guess. McEntee posted a video saying, "Can someone track down the women Kamala Harris says are bleeding out in parking lots because Roe v. Wade was overturned? Don't hold your breath." Well, I mean, if they're bleeding out in parking lots, no, you can't contact them. They're dead. The comments section of that video was soon flooded with women across the country sharing their experiences and not sharing registrations on the right stuff. It was this post that Carter says made her feel like it was important to share her experience. "Oh, that video he made about abortions really upset me," she says, "and I was just like, it needs to be called out." Carter posted a video on TikTok sharing her messages with McEntee and says that she received messages from several other young women who allege similar experiences. I see how this is coming together now. One of these women who spoke to Wired and asked to remain anonymous because she's concerned about her security, wise, said that she connected with McEntee on the Right Stuff dating app before moving to texting him. Don't do that. Stay on the app. The number provided matched the one given to Carter and the one used previously by a Wired reporter. Messages reviewed by Wired also included selfies that clearly appear to be of McEntee. Like Carter, she was 18 at the time. He, of course, again, 34. "I would label myself as semi-conservative," this young woman says. Unlike Carter, she knew who McEntee was and at first thought his profile on the app was an example for users as opposed to his actual account. Last year, a series of TikTok videos showed McEntee going on first dates with women he matched with on the app in various cities. "I had seen him on TikTok. I'd seen him on the news. My family is quite conservative, so I'd seen him before." Once the young woman and McEntee began texting off the app, which I'm sure her conservative parents loved, she says the conversations took a sexually explicit turn because of his conservatism, naturally, including repeated mentions of specific sex acts. That's always the case with these guys. Even after the young woman said she was not comfortable with this. Oh, no. I can't believe he didn't pay attention to her issue. "We are withholding details out of concern for the woman's privacy. Her descriptions of their conversations are consistent with text messages that she showed to Wired. I don't know if I'd be able to read them to you anyway. It's still breakfast time. It was very sexual from day one," she alleges, because it's a dating app. "He kept making comments about my age and how hot it would be to sleep with someone who was my age." Not that he would know necessarily, but that maybe he's just one of those guys trying to relive his college years over and over again. He was a college quarterback. I'll just keep pretending I'm 18. As he had with Carter, McEntee encouraged the woman to come visit him in California. Asked to recall the conversations, she says he would say things like, "I come and visit you and we hook up," or whatever. "You should bring one of your friends," or "You should take a couple of your friends," and was like verifying that my friends were the same age as me as well. He needed somebody to hang out with Matt Gaetz when he was out there. After a couple of weeks, the conversation petered out because she said it was obvious I wasn't going to fly out to California or something to see him. "The more I thought about it, the more it makes me sad that he's sort of a role model, especially for young conservative men," the young woman says, "and I feel like this person isn't a great role model for these young conservative men." Well, okay. Me neither. We agree. During his time at the White House, the Atlantic notes, McEntee regularly hired young, attractive women, the most beautiful 21-year-old girls you could find, and guys who would be absolutely no threat to Johnny in going after those girls, an official told The Atlantic. I do remember reading that now. McEntee's hires were known as the Rockettes and the Dungeons and Dragons group, right? I have to hire some men, hire nerds who won't be able to comfortably compete with me for the hot 21-year-olds I'm hiring. Well, amazingly, as he grew older, the women he hit on grew younger. Isn't that something? Stephen Chung, the man who belongs in prison because his name is onomatopoeia for the closure of the prison doors behind him. Stephen Chung, communications director for the Trump campaign, told Wired that although President Trump has announced a transition leadership team, formal discussion of who will serve in a second Trump administration is premature. So therefore, I guess that's supposed to be a fact check. Johnny McEntee is not definitely going to head the Office of Personnel either for the White House or the greater executive branch, because we haven't named him to do so yet. But if we need anyone to hire the hottest girls for our administration, Brett Stevens, you want to know about the policy? The policy is hire hot girls so that I can walk into their dressing room, and Johnny McEntee is the guy to do it. There you go. Scumbag supreme. And he's going to be a high-ranking Trump official if you let it happen, or either by voting for Trump or allowing him to seize power in his second go-around on the coup. All right. Important to know about him. All right, let's go back to Pocket. Oh, for some reason, Pocket is going to pretend that I've never registered with them and they don't know who I am. And all the hundreds of articles that I have saved for you are just not going to come up. All right, I'll close that window, try opening it all over again, and see if that helps. There we go. Here's a couple of things we should bring up. There are like 100 of them. How about this one? From Politico Europe. I forget from time to time that there is a Politico Europe. Well, there is one. And the big difference, what makes something Politico Europe versus Politico USA, every time you log into Politico Europe, they ask you whether or not you will agree to their privacy policy, because in Europe, they take that seriously. Whereas here, they just steal your data and then let it go in an accidental breach that results in dozens of embarrassed Republicans letting everybody know that they had signed up for Ashley Madison and Nude Africa. Anyway, this is the Confirm Your Priors section of the show, wherein the UK, in the person of the British Foreign Secretary, tells Putin, you're a slave-owning mafia boss. That's the headline that they've slapped on the piece in Politico Europe. British Foreign Secretary invokes legacy of slavery as he attacks imperialism of the Russian leader. Imperialism here enclosed in scare quotes. It's pretty much on the mark. What happened here and why does it confirm our priors? The slavery part is new, that's for sure. But basically the accusation that Russia is a mobocracy and that it's not a country and it has no government, which is something that, but there is a military. That's true. They do have a military wing. Something we've discussed repeatedly on the show. A somewhat controversial position, I suppose, but not necessarily among our listeners. It doesn't trouble our listeners greatly, even if they don't all agree with it. Matt Honeycomb Foster. That's not a nickname. That's his last name. And it is hyphenated. And it has an E on the end. Honeycomb B, like Honeycomb Foster. It's a very pleasant name. Everyone loves Honeycomb. It's big. Yeah. It's not small. No. That was among the worst serial taglines ever, but it worked for the 70s. Matt Honeycomb Foster, he's got a big bite into this story. In Politico Europe, Britain's top diplomat directly accused Vladimir Putin of running a, quote, mafia state. He's right. And likened him to a slave owner in a fiery address at the United Nations Security Council. That is where all of this took place. David Lammy, Lammy. I don't know if there's any weird pronunciation. I don't know of any weirder way to pronounce that, Lammy, but you tell me. The UK's foreign secretary, or as they say, secretary, took aim at the Russian president during the New York gathering Tuesday, telling Russia's representative, we know who you are. And it happened again Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, so that's yesterday. I guess that's the way you write things when there's a difference in the time. Yeah, I was like, it took that long to travel all the way, the news, to travel to New York, to Politico Europe, wherever they are, and then be written and move all the way back here. Just the marvel of modern technology. Lammy invoked the legacy of slavery to take aim at Putin's conduct in the invasion of Ukraine and accused the Russian government of running roughshod over international law while claiming to stand up for the global south. That's one of the new pitches that the Russians are doing in an effort to align them against, presumably, Western liberal democracy. we're the ones that are, this is a long-standing Russian policy, even going well back into the Soviet era, but claiming to stand up for the global South while running roughshod over international law doesn't really line up. Your invasion, he says, is in your own interests, yours alone, to expand your mafia state into a mafia empire, an empire built on corruption. He added, Mr. President, that is to say, Putin, I speak not only as a Briton, as a Londoner, and as Foreign Secretary. There's more that he speaks as. Let's get the music running. But I say to the Russian representative, on his phone as I speak, I guess pretending he wasn't listening, that I stand here also as a black man whose ancestors were taken in chains from Africa at the barrel of a gun to be enslaved, whose ancestors rose up and fought in a great rebellion of the enslaved. Imperialism. I know it when I see it, and I will call it out for what it is, Lammy said. That is interesting, and there's a bit more to it I'd like to add after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time, just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. One last segment before wrapping up for the day. Let's dive further into David Lammy's speech to the UN Security Council. He is the UK's Foreign Secretary, and letting the Russians know he's onto their mobocracy game, but also invoking the specter of slavery. I'm not entirely sure where it's going, but it may just be an anti-imperialism thing all wrapped up in one, unless there's something more specific to it. Let's see. What's up next? The section is entitled Storm Shadows Push. Lammy's address comes as Ukraine continues its intense lobbying push to win approval to use long-range Western missiles, including British-made Storm Shadows, there we go, on targets deep inside Russia. Now I understand. At present, they can only be deployed within Ukraine. The UK supports their use, but US backing is required. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will meet his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden. He's the President of the United States. And the Vice President, you may know her, Kamala Harris, in Washington on Thursday, tomorrow, as he presents his victory plan to defeat Putin. Speaking to reporters as he headed to New York, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made clear that long-range missiles are up for discussion as world leaders gather, but appeared to downplay their significance. We will have discussions about a whole range of issues, and we will listen carefully to what President Zelensky's got to say, Starmer said. I don't think the victory plan will be about a sole issue like long-range missiles. It will be about strategic, overarching route for Ukraine to find a way through this and succeed against Russian aggression, he added. Okay. So no more clarification about why exactly the specter of slavery is a direct parallel, but it's easy for me to understand, certainly, the mobocracy accusation, and it's about time that somebody representing one of the major governments just came out and said it. I don't know whether... I was kind of wondering whether the slavery angle was going to touch on some of the accusations made of the Russian effort to sort of erase Ukrainianism as a whole, to invade Ukraine, to undermine it as an independent nation, to term it the Ukraine, that is, to try to facilitate an understanding, an international understanding of the Ukraine as a region of Russia, as opposed to an independent nation. And certain accusations along the way that, for instance, during the war, as they proceeded into Ukrainian territory, the accusations that they were rounding up and removing Ukrainian youth from the area under cover of, we need to remove them from the danger of war, keep them safe. We'll keep them safe in Russia, re-educate them as Russian speakers and in Russian history with a Russian view of Ukraine as a subordinate territory, as opposed to the historically accurate description, I guess, is that Ukraine and Kyiv were cultural and political centers of independent nationhood well before there ever was a Russia, and that, if anything, Russia was an outpost or almost a colony of eastward expanding Ukrainians, but I guess, teach them the opposite in Russia. The idea being to erase their Ukrainianism and I guess then replant them and repopulate Ukraine with Russophiles, but I guess also mafia-philes, who would undermine Ukrainian independence and resistance from inside. And I guess in that sense, they're sort of being spirited away, and retrained as slaves to Russia and replanted in Ukraine. I don't know if that was the intent, or was it somewhere in the back of his mind when he was making that, or whether it was really all about calling out the hypocrisy of the supposed support for the Global South, given that the Global South's history is one of being used for political purposes by the North, and that was happening again. That might be it. I don't know. I found it very interesting and partial confirmation of priors in our discussion of how Russia ought to be viewed by the rest of the world. What's preventing the rest of the world from viewing them that way is the traditional view of the old Soviet Union, the allowance for the new Russia to inherit the UN Security Council seat held by the Soviet Union, for which there was no particularly good argument other than, I don't know, I guess this is who, I don't know who else. Then we'll have an issue, if not them, who? And we don't really know how to settle that. And 3, if we don't, they do still hold nuclear weapons and they might get insulted and blow up something or us. And so therefore it only makes sense for us. But I think we sort of eased into it. Well, surely they won't immediately turn into a mafia mobocracy and undermine the global world order that way. Oh, no, they did? Oh, well, I thought it would be more gradual than that. Damn. Anyway, so other things I wanted to share with you. One, just as I did mention that Jeremy Freiberger had written a couple extra thoughts along the way, but I think we've covered all of the substantive policy issues about voting down ballot, although always good to remind you that, one, very important, fill out all your ballot and do all your voting down ballot, but to support those campaign efforts down ballot, we've mentioned it every day. But he did. So he broke that conversation off, having finished his series, though there might be some return to it before all is said and done. And he made some other comments, just reminders of shows gone by. He was writing back on September 19th that after completing his listen to the previous day's show, he wanted to comment on the review of the Haitian guy who emigrated to Florida and then found his way to Springfield, Ohio. You'll recall that he made the move to Florida, fleeing the earthquake devastation and ensuing chaos in Haiti, made his way to Florida, finding agricultural work, driving migrant farm workers around between the farms in Florida and other nearby states, and then eventually found out from another Haitian through the grapevine, hey, there's better work, better paying and higher skilled and better living conditions here in Springfield, Ohio. Why don't you come and take part? He writes, Jeremy does, that you're absolutely correct in highlighting the story as the quintessential American dream, and you and Radley Balco rightly pointing out that many of the positive contributions that immigrants have long provided to communities just like Springfield. That was the point of reading Radley Balco's piece that day, as I recall. Also of note is the fact that the Haitian guy's story is Exhibit A for free markets in the private sector, a so-called core principle that conservatism and its GOP purport to champion. The right isn't satisfied even when given exactly what it asks for, which, you see in so many contexts, right? Hey, I don't want any more of this violent uprising. We should have, if you want to demonstrate for civil rights, peaceful protest. Oh, like walking on the sidewalk or taking a knee before during the national anthem before a football game is played. Yeah, not like that either. There's no yes for an answer with those guys either. That raises the question, can conservatism's inherent insecurity ever be placated? Well, right-wing goon Elon Musk, allegedly the world's wealthiest person, shows no sign of ditching his insecurities, nor do plenty of other conservative billionaires. That is a good point and very true. And then another nice letter a couple days later, basically outlining the particular jokes on the show that got him to laugh out loud. And I'm hearing, similar reports. It's been a good stretch, but the news has provided us with good material all along. So that seems fun. Glad to know that you're enjoying that. One comment, though, that he did add on top of enjoying particular jokes. Let's see. I'll soon, he says, be sending something readable regarding those 3 states with crucial state Supreme Court races. So let's wait on that. Good to hear about, and that'll be good education as we get prepared to either head to the polls or send in those mail-in ballots. Meanwhile, it turns out that all those DLCC spotlight races in Nevada are also about a supermajority that Dems hope to achieve for themselves to override Republican Governor Joe Lombardo's veto. And finally, as you know, he says, I'm right there with Stuart Rothenberg regarding the potential relative blowout in favor of Dems. And although I think the Harris-Walz juggernaut is doing an absolutely terrific job, I've always sensed that any competent Dem at the top of the ticket would produce roughly the same end result. Why? Because of how categorically awful conservatism is and its GOP, of course, have let themselves become. America simply doesn't want that. Having said as much, I'm not easing up one bit. Rather, I'm using this environment to drive the right as far into the political wilderness as possible. So, I think always good commentary and always worth sharing, and the way a lot of us feel. All right, now pushing forward with other things that were in pocket that I needed to share with you, some of which are relatively long reads. Let's try this one. This one caught my eye as a subject of interest. In Lawfare, which is usually a long and complex read, and for some reason is not currently registering my click to open the damn thing up. Here we go. Slowly but surely getting there. Quinta Jurecic and Molly Reynolds writing this one. Quinta's been active lately on Blue Sky, theorizing in more or less the right directions about what to look out for and what a second, the threats of a second Trump administration, et cetera. As many people are writing about that. Oh, that reminds me, there's definitely something else I wanted to bring to your attention. But I've started on this one. But here's an interesting angle on things. What happened to the Biden impeachment? You remember that was happening, and the Republicans mostly gave up, found out it just was not popular, wasn't going anywhere anyway. So why waste time on it? Why waste time on looking back on it? Well, they've got an interesting angle on things. GOP efforts to impeach President Biden appear to have spluttered. It's an unusual word for it, but okay. But the attempt sheds light on the current and future politics of impeachment. And I saw her just mentioning it, summarizing it a little bit on Blue Sky. Caught my attention because it got into the nature of the accusations or the worries about so-called tit-for-tat impeachments, which is, of course, exactly what the Republicans were doing with the Biden impeachment. Because you impeached Trump, we're going to teach you a lesson and try to impeach Biden just to show something. What is that something? How easy it is to impeach a president, or how easy it is to manufacture controversy if you want to, and therefore that bolsters our argument that your impeachment of Trump was bogus in some way. We'll show you a bogus impeachment, and that'll make you think that the previous substantive ones were bogus too. Well, no, it doesn't really work like that. But it awakened memories for me of thoughts of impeaching George W. Bush and or Dick Cheney at the time for, well, I don't know, let's say warrantless surveillance of American citizens, indefinite detention of people who weren't quite prisoners of war and had no international status whatsoever, torture employed against people in Afghanistan and Iraq for political gain in the hopes that they would be coerced into confessing something that would bolster the Republican foreign policy agenda, things you ought to be impeached for. And that Republicans at the time screamed that, no, this isn't substantive at all. This would be a tit-for-tat retaliatory impeachment of George W. Bush because of the Clinton impeachment, which, itself was highly questionable just in terms of the basis for it at all. Republicans were screaming about how terrible tit-for-tat impeachment would be for America, even though the Bush impeachment was, at least by my argument, somewhat substantive, even in comparison to the Clinton impeachment. But they insisted that this was a terrible thing and could never be countenanced. But then, of course, as soon as they got the opportunity to drum up a tit-for-tat impeachment themselves, they went ahead and did it because they have no core principles. Anyway, here's their view of it, and this will probably take us all the way to the end. If an impeachment report falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? That's the setup. House Republicans might well be asking themselves this question. On August 19th, the House Oversight, Judiciary, and Ways and Means Committees all got together and released a final report of their impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden, accusing him, albeit on unclear grounds, of, quote, abusing his office and defrauding the United States. Now, of course, those were the accusations made against Donald Trump, and so they figured it was only fair and reasonable that they accused Joe Biden of the same thing, because after all, liberals were mad at Donald Trump and then said these things about him. They were substantively backed up, and he's facing criminal charges on those accusations right now, and whereas no criminal charges have been recommended even for Joe Biden and the things that they're mad about. But Republicans say, well, we're mad too, and so therefore our anger is clearly as good as your anger, so we might as well just claim to be angry about the same things that you were angry about. That way, if you say, no, you shouldn't be angry about them, it will be hypocrisy. Nah, that doesn't work that way either. I mean, he didn't abuse his office or defraud the United States. That's a big problem with your accusation. It's a huge hole in it. Anyway, as they continue, yet more than a month later, that report has essentially vanished from the political scene, which again, if you were making legitimate accusations that he is abusing his office and defrauding the United States, that report doesn't disappear, especially in the context of impeachment. It gets moved forward. It gets attention in the press. It gets prosecuted in the Senate. But no, It's not being done because it was garbage to begin with, right? The chamber has made no motion towards actually setting a vote to impeach the president, because they'd lose it. When the House returned from recess on September 9th, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, hands full with trying to keep the government open, didn't seem to have impeachment on his to-do list. Isn't that something? Even the biggest GOP proponents of holding a vote have largely cooled on the issue. On the Democratic side of the aisle, meanwhile, some members were eager for Republicans to devote attention to the issue, believing that doing so would remind voters of the GOP's extremism, but their energy appears to have faded as well. All in all, Republicans seem somewhat uncertain about precisely what the report has accomplished, especially given Biden's decreased relevance into the 2024 presidential race after he stepped aside in favor of Vice President Kamala Harris, which I think, by the way, pretty much reveals the whole intent of it. It was essentially an attempt to Benghazi Biden. Well, we'll investigate and we'll make a stink and blah. Oh, he stepped aside. All right. Well, all those substantive issues that we totally said were not about political retaliation, I guess they were about political retaliation. Oh, well. Anyway, given this anticlimax, it would be easy to write off the report as yet another quixotic mission by an increasingly radical flank of the House Republican Conference. Would be. But this story is worth a closer look for what it says about the uses and limitations of impeachment as a political tool and how these dynamics play out and might play out in the future within the House as an institution. How so? Tell me more. Does this, along with the nearly party line impeachment of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas in February, represent the dawn of a new era of retaliatory impeachments? A tit for tat. Right. A tit for tat for the two Democratic-led impeachments of Donald Trump? Or is it instead a demonstration that politicized impeachments are harder than expected to get off the ground? Even if the Biden report vanishes without much of a political trace, it could still have legal and institutional effects on future impeachments and investigations. It's an interesting question because sometimes that is brought up as an argument against doing these sorts of frivolous impeachments. Why? It'll have an effect on future impeachments and investigations and devalue them. And it may very well be that in Republican minds, the answer to that is, well, good, because the only substantive impeachments that are ever brought are against Republicans. Because why? Well, Republicans would say, because we're being unfairly targeted by liberal media. And Democrats would say, well, you're the ones that actually are committing crimes all the time, and we have to impeach you. Yes. But interesting. Yeah. Was it a new era of retaliatory impeachment, or is it a continuation of the old era of retaliatory impeachments that people were accusing Democrats of making when they wanted to hold George W. Bush to account, but it's mutated because the shoe is on the other foot? I don't know. Substantively, they continue, it's not really clear what to take away from the report, which accuses Biden of impeachable conduct, but includes precious few specifics about what the president is personally alleged to have done. It's the sort of thing that would be returned as a paper in high school. Like, you fail to argue in any way to support the title of your piece. You're going to have to go back and do some more research. I'm sorry. The document focuses chiefly on less than savory business deals by Biden's son, Hunter, and brother, James, but with little evidence that the president personally knew of or benefited from these entanglements. There are people named Biden we don't like for apparently good reason. Maybe not good reason, but apparently good reason. And so therefore, I don't know, basically you should punish any person named Biden. Is that okay? Can we do that? No. Republican investigators also returned to a flimsy allegation circulated by Trump himself in the summer of 2019, and you know he can take his word for it, which helped precipitate the first Trump impeachment when the then president pressured Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, there he is again, to back up the claim. Trump insisted baselessly that Biden, as vice president, leaned on the Ukrainian government to drop an investigation into the gas company Burisma, on whose board Hunter Biden sat, In addition to this dubious story, the report also contains a lengthy section objecting to what it characterizes as the Biden administration's, quote, hostility towards and unwillingness to cooperate with the House's impeachment inquiry and Congress's legislative oversight. Oh, no, not that. To understand the dynamics animating the report, it's helpful to keep in mind the cultural norm in Congress of appealing to precedent as the basis for establishing the credibility and value of a given approach, an appeal that in this case seems designed to justify retaliatory accusations in the absence of firm evidence. When the House's Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, remember that they had one, held its first hearing in 2023, it did so in prime time. Why? I mean, no one was interested, right? But why did they do it? Well, it was exactly what the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol had done. And so there you go. Proponents of creating a special subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee on the weaponization of the federal government similarly appealed to the January 6th panel, advocating for the kind of budget and kind of staff, we said, at least as much as the January 6th committee is what they were arguing for. Well, they did it with January 6th. Well, yeah, there was an insurrection. You sacked the Capitol. Well, anything that we want to investigate then should therefore have the same resources. Well, shouldn't the situation be equivalent? No. This reliance on institutional precedent helps explain several features of the Biden impeachment report, beginning with its length. It clocks in at 291 pages. Oddly enough, roughly the length of the House Intelligence Committee's 2019 report preceding the first Trump impeachment. Right? If you're going to do this impeachment, you got to write a report. How many pages? I don't know. The other one was 290 pages. Do something like that. And this feels like a C. You know, right? Bulk it up. Give me a couple of charts and graphs. Make it an A. That report, though, had a great deal more in the way of substance. Something had actually happened, of course. So they investigated it, and this is how long it took to write it up. It documented the twists and turns of Trump's efforts to extort Ukraine. The House GOP report, in contrast, pads out its word count by relying heavily on ominous insinuation without much to back it up. In other words, lots of dramatic music, but not much in the way of facts. In one instance, for example, the report makes a great deal out of two large checks written to Joe Biden by James Biden and his wife Sarah, which GOP investigators suggest were a means of transmitting shady money to Joe Biden. Yet, the report doesn't address the dispositive indications that the checks were repayments on a loan from Joe Biden to his brother. In other words, taking care of your responsibilities. In another instance, the report darkly describes Biden's supposedly corrupt involvement in the March 2016 firing of Ukrainian Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin, without noting the extensive evidence presented by Democrats over the course of the first Trump impeachment, of course, that Biden's efforts were in line with the policies of the Obama administration and of Ukraine's European partners. The substantive echoes of the first Trump impeachment are themselves telling. Again and again, throughout the 291 pages, the report draws both implicit and explicit comparisons with both Trump impeachments and with the various prosecutions of Trump to justify Republican strategy in attacking Biden. Some of these connections involve the facts alleged against Biden with an edge of, I know you are, but what am I? If the Democratic Party has made an allegation against Trump, the House GOP report suggests, so too can that same allegation be turned against Biden. The whole actual effort and the whole actual report, they admit it in the report, we're doing this because you did it. That's the interesting angle here. Consider, for example, the core allegation at the heart of both the investigation into the Russian election interference in 2016 and the first impeachment, that Trump was allowing himself to be influenced by and improperly exerting influence over foreign governments. The Biden impeachment report flips this around to accuse the president's family of influence peddling, and that involved entities and that involved individuals and entities from some of America's greatest adversaries, or adversaries if you prefer, such as China and Russia. I can't believe it. They're accusing him of being involved with Russia. At one point, the report charges the Biden family with selling political influence abroad, stating that the Bidens did not have a golf course, real property, a clothing line, or media business, all businesses that Trump and his family have explored at one time or another. Okay, like as if that was an excuse for, it's a good reason to be involved with the Russians. No, it's actually the worst possible reason. What are you talking about? Among the articles of impeachment against Trump during the Ukraine scandal was the allegation that Trump obstructed Congress by refusing to comply with House subpoenas. Here, the report accuses the Biden administration of obstructing the committee's impeachment inquiry by withholding key documents and witnesses. The Mueller report, the findings of the first impeachment, and the House January 6th committee all focused on Trump's penchant for using government power, particularly the Justice Department, as a weapon against his enemies. Likewise, House Republicans claim, with little evidence, that Biden somehow interfered with the Justice Department's handling of the criminal investigation and prosecution of Hunter Biden on tax and gun charges. So, in other words, they're just saying, oh yeah, you say we did this, well we say you did that, and there's just no there. And I mean, while I guess it's on the surface true that both the Trump administration and the Biden administration resisted subpoenas from congressional committees, the Trump administration eventually was forced to comply by the courts. They had to litigate this all the way up to the Supreme Court in many cases and force them to turn over those documents to the committees of inquiry having outlined to the courts, yes, we have a substantive and overriding interest in this. There's an impeachment going on. And the Republicans use this to say, all right, well, you're able to subpoena things when an impeachment is going on. Well, then here's an impeachment. But then they didn't litigate their way all the way up to the Supreme Court and back down and back up and back down again. They just simply said, well, you're in contempt because the precedent has been established. Well, it was established against you, and you still resisted the whole time. You haven't actually proven that the situations are analogous here. We were in court. You have the opportunity to prove the similarities. How come you're not doing it? Because we don't want to, and we want you to just give us those documents or get directly to impeachment. Well, again, it just doesn't work that way.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
One thing that does work this way is time. You run out of it just the same, no matter whether you get through the entirety of the article or not. So, okay, perhaps we'll continue this tomorrow. And in the meantime, next up, it's the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. He'll be collecting his version of the most important stories from around the country and around the world next. We'll see you tomorrow.